Welcome to my October 20th full moon video. This is my Halloween video. See the hellfire behind me?
Yeah, I see it.
That's Greg Bowe. I didn't introduce him yet, but he's going to help me do my Halloween video tonight. So go ahead, Greg. What do you got to say tonight?
Well, I'm certainly glad to be over coronavirus. Our last video, it was awful. I mean, I was just so sick. I was really having a time. So it's great that it's great to not have coronavirus and feel back to normal now.
Our last video was really good. I gave a lot of really good information.
Oh no, you were good. I wasn't good. I was bad. I was really struggling. But back to full health, and I noticed the moon is bright, full. There's not a star in the sky, or not a cloud in the sky. You see the bright stars and see the bright moon tonight. And you said the moon is in Aries. Interesting, because that's kind of connected with war. So, and we're going to be talking some about the moon tonight and about how it is connected a little bit to some of these murders. Now, I went back and I checked. We're specifically talking about two of your wives that were murdered, Terry and Victoria. And Terry was your. So you never actually married Terry, right? That was she was
murdered on my birthday. She was murdered on my birthday, kind of like this girl behind me here. I found Terry hanging in our house by her dog's leash after she told me some people were stalking her.
Yeah, very fitting. I get that somber, somber reminder of what happened.
Yeah, I made my background match my life. Victoria was murdered Halloween Day, and Terry was murdered on my birthday, July 4th. Terry was my fiance, and Victoria was my wife.
Yeah. A lot of very interesting things that happened when Terry was murdered. Some very interesting correlations with dates and times and the moon, and just all kinds of interesting things.
Well, they like murdering my wives on holidays.
They did. And now Terry, she was murdered on your birthday on 7/4/2003, the July 4th. And you had mentioned before that you believe that she was murdered at 9:11 p.m. or very, very close to it.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And it was interesting that the full moon in July was not on July 4, but it was on July 13, and it was at 7:22 p.m. And interestingly, on July 22nd, while Terry was in the hospital, there was a large sinkhole that opened up. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that sinkhole.
Well, about the time she was murdered, a sinkhole occurred next to my farm, a huge sinkhole. It took them 6 months to fill it in. And other than that, I don't have anything to say about it.
Okay.
It was a great big sinkhole in my life because, number one, I and Terry were going to get married. She was murdered on my birthday, July 4th, 2003. She was Sarah Heath Palin's family. That was her name, Terry Heath.
Right.
McCain was marking my brother Michael, who was still alive but had cancer, and he had to have his ears removed. And on and on and on. Terry was lived in Wisconsin, but she was born in Northern California, where I am today. And she was born on a farm and grew up on a farm. And she created the Head Start program, and Ronald Reagan held her up as a role model in Head Start when he first made the program nationwide. And Terry was running a Head Start and CPS office in Wisconsin. And she was in the middle of protecting two little kids, a little boy and a girl, about a 4-year-old, 5-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy from the porno industry. And two off-duty Wisconsin policemen in the middle of her investigation into the porno ring using that little boy and girl via their mother, they broke into her CPS and Head Start office and kidnapped her and drove her across 3-4 state lines. And she escaped them and called me on the phone and said, "Hugh, you're the only guy on earth I trust. Help me. I've been kidnapped by 2 policemen." And prior to that, her son had died in a car accident. She was upset about that still. And then her mother died. And when she asked me to help her, I bought her a ranch in Tennessee, and I flew to Wisconsin, and we packed her belongings out of her house in front of the military base there in Menominee, Wisconsin. She lived in front of the Army base there. Put it in a semi, and I moved her to Tennessee onto a Civil War ranch that was handed to me by a little mafia prick who set me up so they could murder her there. The farm was owned by Manning, and the guy that took the money in, his name was Woody. And at that time, you had Disney, who I went to church with the Disney family and published their music. And I went to church with the Disney family when I was born. That was my mother's church, the Methodist church. The Disney family were Methodists, like George Bush was Methodist. And Terry never got to complete her investigation in protecting those 2 little kids because the policeman kidnapped her. And these were just like they did to me when I was a kid on the Great Lakes on the other side of Michigan. On the Michigan side, they were putting us kids on seaplanes on the Great Lakes and flying us out to California and selling us for sex to gay men and women, lesbian women, gay men. I would imagine there were some straight people too, but the majority of the planes were being flown out by gays who were getting married, and back then that wasn't legal. So I put Terry on this farm, and like I say, she didn't get to protect those little kids. And it's interesting to note in today's world, that's where Biden is shipping all the Haitians to, illegally crossing the border. All those kids are going to Wisconsin, where Terry couldn't protect the kids because two off-duty policemen kidnapped her. So Biden knows exactly where he's shipping the kids to, where they stopped the porno industry. And I would real strongly suggest to the FBI that Biden is helping the porno industry use those Haitian kids he's moving to Wisconsin. And it's not just Haitian kids, it's Mexican kids too. Terry definitely told me 5 minutes before I found her murdered, hanging in the house like the ghost here behind me, that she was being stalked again on our ranch in Tennessee, the Manning Ranch. And when she was murdered, Tom Garrett and CBS were busy giving you the Bradley Manning after 9/11, busy making that story up to hide the Kennedy murders. And Manning and my alumni at Warren, Michigan, Garrison, they co-created the JFK archives, and the JFK archives are a bunch of I want to swear, but I won't swear. I'll say they're a bunch of baloney, and everybody in the JFK archives is one of my neighbors in Warren, Michigan. And they framed Oswald for the murder of Kennedy. And I was renting the carousel from Jack Ruby's trademark at Shelby Service Center prior to Terry being kidnapped and driven across state lines as she protected kids being kidnapped like I was in 1957. So this Oakland County child killings, it went on when I was 54 and 57 kidnapped. They murdered kids for 20 years, threw them on my properties. And Terry was on the tail of this same group of gays who kidnapped me and lesbians from my public school. The principal at my school would kidnap me with my teacher, Miss Wallace and Long, and they're the families of governors. And they would hand me over to these gay families of governors who would rape me and beat us up if we didn't give them the sex they wanted. And many of us, they beat to death, chained to a toilet. And I don't think this, I know this, I lived this. And L. Brooks Patterson and the Oakland County Police and the Macomb County Sheriff Hackle, they got a lot of money from the federal government to solve murders of kids they never solved. And it was millions of dollars. And by design, they never made out police reports for people like me back in the 50s when those killings first started. And Terry had created the Head Start program in the 60s for President Ronald Reagan, and all of this was covered up. When Terry was murdered, and I found her hanging in our house after she told me some people were stalking her every time she walked her dog. That's why I have the dog in the background here. She's a pretty little wolf. But Terry had two little dogs, and at that time she had one. One of her dogs died. Tucker died, and she still had Gizmo. And she was outside for 5 minutes, and they hung her in her dog's leash. Brought her in my house through the back door. They were probably hiding in our barn, and they murdered her.
And when you found her, you began CPR as you were carrying her back to the house.
Yeah, before I ever took her out of the dog's leash, she was still hanging. I put air into her lungs while she was still hanging. I lifted her up in one arm, undid the dog leash with the other hand, and I was already giving her CPR before I put her down on our couch. And I had already made a phone call to 911 as I laid her on the couch giving her CPR. Terry was alive when I moved her to the hospital and doing well.
Yeah, now that really says a lot, Hugh, for any of those characters out there that want to give you a hard time and try to pin this on you or blame you. I mean,
this isn't about me. This is about my murdered fiance, Terry. She was a really nice person. When I was in the 60s, I was forming a band called Bottom Line, playing in the clubs, strip clubs in Detroit and Chicago and in Canada. She was busy protecting little kids, creating a Head Start program with President Reagan. She was the same age. She was 2 years older than me. And I was 15, she was 16, 17. And she was protecting little kids in California. And not just California, the president made her program nationwide. So she was teaching little kids how to read and write, do numbers and numerals before they even went to kindergarten. And she was a nice woman. And two off-duty policemen kidnapped her right out of a CPS office while she was protecting little kids in Wisconsin. And I believe those same policemen caught up with her in Tennessee and murdered her as she walked her dog. And when she died, this never come out that she was murdered. They wrote it up as a suicide. There was no obituary. Her sister, whom she had had a fight with a couple months earlier, come out, took her off of life support. 30 days later, she didn't die because she was getting better. I wasn't allowed in the hospital. Her fiance wasn't allowed to say hi to her on a daily basis. Her sister had a doctor overdose her on drugs, heroin, drugs that kill you. And this is after her sister and her had a big fight. Terry actually punched her sister out over little kids. And
And didn't she inherit some, I don't know, property or money or something? I
well, her
forget.
mother had died before she moved out to my house, and I don't know exactly how much, but Terry had quite a bit of money in the bank. And the sister, that's what she wanted, was the money. So she, instead
Yeah.
of helping Terry to continue to recover, she took her off life support and had the doctor drug her when taking her off of life support didn't kill her. Terry was progressing and doing better. She was murdered a second time 30 days after I saved her life on July
Right.
4th by her own family. And she was my fiance, but I wasn't allowed to see her once her sister, whom she had had a fight with, got to Tennessee. I'm not real happy about that. When her sister went back to Washington, where she lived, and with Terry's money, and got back to the comfort of her home, then the nurses from the hospital came to me and complained about them murdering my fiance. All the nurses that were taking care of Terry told me that she was doing much better and she was progressing very well when they murdered her. So she was actually murdered twice, once by two policemen stalking her, and then a second time by her own family.
And those dates would have been on July 4th, and the other one would have been on 8/14, August 14th.
Somewhere around there. I'm not sure of the dates, but 30 days later. And she was progressing and doing well. And I would have never murdered her. I wouldn't have. She was doing better.
Right.
I would have continued to support her and help her to live because I believe she wanted to live. Or she wouldn't have told me people were stalking her when she walked the dog. And I feel bad because that night I didn't walk the dog. I forgot, and she took it out in our backyard, and then I found her murdered.
Yeah.
I feel a little guilt about that. She had asked me to do it, and I meant to do it, but I got busy with something else, a phone call or something, and I didn't walk.
Yeah, I don't really feel like, and you've mentioned that before, but I really don't feel like you should blame yourself for that.
Well, I
mean,
do. I love the woman.
Sure.
Uh, I'll regret not taking the dog for a walk the rest of my life. Those.
Well, it's an extremely well orchestrated attack. I mean, even sure, but that's just like a simple mistake. But
Well,
they clearly had this planned.
There's even more to that. In her office, she had statues that were made at my high school in Michigan. When I was in ninth grade, the Potter family made some statues at Warren High that Terry bought, and they were in her CPS office. Her co-workers in the police broke those statues from my school in Warren High. So there's a lot more intertwined in this story with my public school system that kidnapped me and other kids in Oakland County and murdered them. And then the police helped cover up the Oakland County child killings. They've never solved a single killing of a single kid. And all those kids for 20 years were dumped on and off of my family's properties and streets named off of us. President Ford is Gardner and King. I'm the Gardner and King family. One of the last kids they murdered was Timmy King, my own cousin. And they dumped him. The girl before him, they picked off of Gardner Street, and I'm the Gardner family. Then they dumped the kid in a ditch on Gardner Street, and another one on my properties. And then the newspaper had one of my family members' car as the main suspect, and my family member wasn't the Oakland County child killing. That was my younger brother. He had a gremlin, and they put that gremlin all over the front page as they murdered kids and threw them in my family's ditches. And my family didn't know that these were the people who kidnapped me when I was 4 in the 57. That's when they first started killing the kids. And then there's a kid they dumped in Pennsylvania Field who looks exactly like me. And I believe he's my missing twin. They introduced me to him, and then they murdered him.
Yeah, they wrote a book about him and addressed it to Mr. H.
Yeah, well, I don't pay no attention. I don't pay any attention to the books these people write. They've been making fun of me in movies and in the media. They kill people to mark me as they hide me.
But don't you think that's interesting and pretty obvious and conspicuous there that they addressed it to Mr. H? I mean, you're Hugh.
No, they've done these things to me all my life. I was kidnapped on the same day they murdered Admiral Byrd, and my mother is his family member. She told me he was murdered, and my mother was a nurse. I believe my mother. I don't believe the official report.
Right.
And why would I be kidnapped on the same day he died if he wasn't murdered? And then my own father's hands were cut off by Pratt in Behringer at Twin Pines. And Twin Pines is 9/11 and with Michael J. Fox, who now has Parkinson's. And on the day I was kidnapped, the man with Parkinson's disease had knocked on my family door and sat with me for an hour. None of this is coincidence.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how they really put this together so meticulously.
No, all of this was planned. And then these same people, they planned to murder a Kennedy in my neighborhood. And I don't think it. I know the civil engineer that planned the streets and put his name on the streets before he was even president. I mean, I know.
And that, right. That's why Kennedy was shot at, his or the frame on the Zapruder film was 314. It was like a pie reference frame. Yeah. And then, Lincoln was shot at, and they uses the 722 that was here in Terry's murder. Okay. He died at 7:22 a.m. Reagan was shot at 2:27 p.m.
These people have used these numbers, my age and my birth date, all my life. They're in all movies and they make fun of me. They've actually made movies about murdering Terry. They've made movies about murdering Victoria. When Victoria was murdered, Tom Garrett at CBS from his White House office destroyed my income at the same time they murdered Victoria, and the attorney I hired to file murder charges, Tom Garrett, destroyed my income on the very day that happened.
Yeah. And
CBS covered Kennedy's murder, and I was sitting on the Manning properties. Garrison's my alumni. I was a teacher in Warren, Michigan with Garrison at the age of 14, 15 years old. Garrison was a teacher in Warren Consolidated. So was I. I know these people. I really know the people who framed Oswald. And I know that Osborne framed Oswald. And that was Oswald's bunkmate in the Marine Corps. And I don't think it. That's who was murdering kids in my neighborhood.
And if anybody wants to go back and watch that video, I did put it on a playlist there on my YouTube channel, so they can go back and see Mac Osborne talking about how he was with Oswald in the military.
And now I moved out here. Lakota Indian family gave me a place to stay because I didn't want to stay on the Manning Ranch anymore. And they own the Mount Rushmore with the presidents, and I'm related to 3 of the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore, and the 4th president is my friend here on Facebook. It's just amazing how my whole life has been covered up. And I've had 4 wives murdered. And when I had 3 murdered wives, the world got Triple H. And Triple H worked for the WWF with Hulk Hogan and Jesse Ventura, who tell you they want the truth of John F. Kennedy and Hoffa. And I was arrested a few hours after Hoffa disappeared, and my mother-in-law was sitting with him at the Sly Fox. And I had bought a car from Whitey that broke down a mile from where I bought it. And then the FBI detained me for Hoffa's murder and told me I buried him in my car, but I'm not mentioned in any news, no books. I know Miller, I know Tony Tocco, the people who claimed, and JFK, the Hunt family grew up next door to me. The Klein family, the Lawson family, the Waldo family, all these families are my neighbors in Warren, Michigan. And these are the families in the Warren report that framed Oswald. And Oswald did not kill Kennedy. I went to kindergarten with Sirhan's daughter, Camilla Sirhan. At the same time, they introduced me to my own twin or my own clone, and then murdered him and dumped his body in Pennsylvania. I'm not a pipe dream. I've lived these things. And my whole life, police in Oakland and Macomb and senators who own the media with the Queen of England, they've hidden this truth. They covered up what was done to me at the age of 3 and 4 years old. They covered up the murders of the kids. They covered up the murders of my friends, the Kennedy family. And I don't exist. There's no police reports about my kidnap at 4. I was hit over the head with an axe at 3, at 2 years old, an axe. I was hit over the head with an axe. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't even want to go into that. There's no police reports. And this
For
was
nothing. Yeah, I know.
no little axe. This was a fire axe, the kind of a fireman would carry to break down a door. I was hit over the head with a fire axe. Next thing I know, I'm chained to a toilet. Gay men and women are raping me. I'm 4 years old. Then I'm put on an Indian reservation, and Gordon Lightfoot comes off the Indian reservation singing the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and the merchant marines on the Edmund Fitzgerald are my neighbors. None of this is coincidence, and it's all related to Kennedy and his brother's murders, even Sharice Kennedy. And I don't think it, I know it. I've been fighting these people in silence without any help from the police my entire life. And you know that, Greg. I've told you things and you look into it. And what do you find when you look into the things I say?
I have tons and tons and tons of things that I've saved and collected to verify each little piece of what you're saying, as best as I can. Everything always makes sense and comes together. I mean, we found that Mac Osborne video. That was pretty obvious. We found you had a case against Leslie Groves and against the Groves family, and Leslie Groves built the Pentagon. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Nobody knows what you're talking about there. Leslie Groves built the Pentagon. I had a civil rights case against Groves because they set me up with a phony felony on my police record.
Right.
And my civil rights case was in the Pentagon on 9/11. The receipts to my business bottom line that DuPont and the WWF stole were in the Twin Towers on 9/11. And people can't put all this together because they don't know my life. And I keep trying to put it together, but nobody listens or reads.
No, it all makes perfect sense. And that's why 9/11 had to happen to cover up all this theft that they did.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you writing my book. It'll be my biography, and it'll be done in a few more months, and it'll be published. And you have more truth than any man on earth, Greg.
Now I realize that it's a weird feeling knowing that I understand and see something that's so real, and then look around and understand how come nobody else in this. I can talk to Muslims all day long in other countries, and they'll understand the story, but I can't find another American that will have.
That's because all my Christian neighbors framed Oswald, hid the murders of children and the governors who did it, and they're not going to admit to what they did. Right. That's why, Greg.
Right.
And I'm never going to shut up. I will.
No, because you have.
I will make these videos until the day I die. My wives, none of them had an obituary. I've got 4 murdered. They were sodomized, dismembered, and murdered on holidays.
That's not right. If this had happened to anybody else, then
it would be all over the news.
Right.
But because it happened to me, the little 4-year-old kid in Oakland County that they cover up, there's nothing anywhere. And then they try to tell me I murdered the wives. No, I saved my wives' lives. I gave them CPR and delivered them to hospitals, and they were murdered twice.
Right. That's what I started to say there earlier. If you were the one guilty, you're not going to bring her to the hospital able to speak intelligently and talk to the nurses and doctors, so that she can tell them that you did it. What kind of an idiot would do that?
My last Victoria was sitting up waiting to come home, talking to everybody around her, and she knew I didn't kill her. You're absolutely right. I delivered Terry alive. She was starting to wake up. Then they told me I couldn't see her, and then they killed her again. And they did the same thing with Victoria. They cut Victoria's ears off and called me on the advocate's phone, and there's a whole story behind that.
Yeah.
Victoria, they sodomized Victoria, and you know I have the doctor records for that, don't you, Greg?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen the records, and they
But you know the police have
admit
never,
to the.
you know I have a murder case for her, and the police have never read them.
Yeah,
And
I mean
that's-
they described the things that happened to her. I mean it's obvious that they knew. And it
yeah,
is,
her ears were cut off, and there was nothing wrong with her
how
ears.
does that not get reported to the police? How does that
Oh,
not end
well,
up becoming a?
I'm the reason I have the hellfire behind me is because I moved out here on the West Coast, and I've been surrounded by fires for 8 years, 9 years now. The
Yeah.
fires around my home never stop. As soon as
No, I
one
know.
stops, they do another. And gee, the people who framed Lee Harvey Oswald, 6 or 7 of them have died in these fires. Waldo, Lawson, Smith, and another woman. All of these people helped frame Oswald, and these people lived around me when I was kidnapped at 4 by the principal in my public school on Hoover Street. Hoover Street and Hoover School was J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI. And the basement I was chained in is the family that runs the sex crime division at the FBI. And I was kidnapped as my family member, Admiral Byrd, was murdered. And all of this is covered up in all news. The
Right,
news is
right.
run by the Graham family.
And Graham's out there, and what they do is they'll go out and they'll create stupid stories that are clear distractions from any evidence. Tell you Bird had a diary and found the center of the earth, and you know all kinds of just complete deviations from
No, I want my
reality.
diary back. That's my
Right?
diary.
Yeah, yeah. And all of America is distracted by these stupid stories, and that's why you can't find an American that knows any kind of reality or
No,
truth.
they
But
don't
they
know
all
any
think they
history.
are.
No
Right.
history at all. And then
And
they
they're being led around like little
covered up
puppy dogs by
Kennedy's
Graham.
murder. They covered up Kennedy's murder with Bradley Manning. You have Manning and Garrison co-created the JFK archives, which are nonsense. And then they murdered my 3rd wife, and they gave the world Bradley Manning as I lived on the Manning Civil War Ranch. After destroying the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, the Twin Towers had the theft of $2 trillion from me in the Twin Towers. Building 7 had my FBI records. And the Pentagon had my civil rights case. They blew up all 3 buildings. And then the plane in Pennsylvania, that's where my murdered 3rd wife was born. And my twin's body was thrown after he was murdered, beat to death at 4.
Yeah, but gee, it has nothing to do with you.
Then they don't interview me. I don't exist. I own Bottom Line New York since the 60s, Greg. I created the word bottom line.
And it's not like they come and they interview and they fact check you and find you to be crazy. No, they don't talk to you. They avoid
They don't do
everything.
anything.
You're
They
making
just
the
ignore
biggest claims on earth, and there's nobody
I'm
else.
ignored by all paper, all radio, and all media.
They don't even put your wife's murders in the obituary.
I had a TV station in Denmark interview me, and they put my story all over Europe, but they won't air it here in America.
Right.
Because
and again, the Muslims know it in Dubai, or not Dubai. What was it? Kuwait. They know about it.
They bought me a they offered me a TV station and a home in Kuwait. I turned them down because Cheney lived there, and I know Cheney and Bush would have me murdered. And I don't think it. They murdered my wives. I know they'll murder me. And that's
Bush
not
was
why I
president
turned him
when
down.
Terry was.
That's really not why I turned him down, but I know Cheney lived there. I turned him down because I'm an American and my family's ancestors created this country. I'm on all the money. I'm Jackson, Grant, Hamilton, Chase, Morgan. These are my cousins. And I'm not about to leave a country my family founded and run like a chicken to Kuwait.
No, you're really pulling off a one-man Alamo here. You're standing your ground and
No, I will do this till I die, Greg. And you know yourself,
right.
I've been murdered. I've been murdered on 3 different occasions before I was 17.
You're hit on the head, and then well, even and after that too. I mean, they knocked down the plane out of the sky somehow. You don't even know after drugging you, and you were on the plane, and then they didn't even report that you lived. They just said a little girl lived. It's unbelievable what they've
No,
done.
this is all phony news, Greg. And then my federal license for Bottom Line came from Foley Federal Court. And after 9/11, they told you Muslims beheaded Foley. This is the people who kidnapped me at 4, who murdered little kids, trying to scare me into shutting up. And I'm not going to shut up. You
Yeah,
murdered
every truth seeker on earth is like a little puppy dog
You-
being led around by Graham.
Greg, they murdered 4 of my wives. I am never going to shut up.
Right.
And
And you shouldn't.
I know exactly who did it. And they murdered 2 judges. They've murdered my attorneys. They murdered 4 of my wives. And this is all about hiding the porno ring that killed the Kennedys. And you know yourself, even my initials are on the Cuban boat from the
Yeah, I
Bay
saw
of
that.
Pigs.
Yeah.
From the Bay of Pigs. And my Skull and Bones. My family created Skull and Bones.
Right.
And
Right.
nobody knows these things. I own the bus patents. You're president, you elected Bush, 3 terms, old man, and then you elected his kid. They blew up the Twin Towers. It wasn't Muslims. George Bush did that. His name is Bus H. I'm Hugh,
Right.
and I own the patent on all the buses in the country. They stole that from me too. Bus H, Bush. I'm tired of this country and the greedy people in it who run the media and the White House, and then tell me how good the military and the police are when the military cover up the murders of 4 of my wives. My wives were dismembered and murdered.
Well, there's no question it's military. I mean, who else comes up with this sort of a code? Okay, she's hung on 9/11 p.m. 42 days later, which is the numbers on your birth certificate. You had your not certificate, but your baby pictures had 42 and 9/11 on it. They were taken on 9/11, had 42 drawn on it, and then 42 days later, it's the 227th day of the year, or 226. It would have been announced the 227th day
And
of the
they
year
used
if
my
they
chalk
bothered to
drawing. They
announce it.
used my chalk drawing. And
Yeah,
the people that
It's
use my
unbelievable
chalk,
how well they organized it.
the people that use my chalk drawing is my still alive wife. My second wife's still alive. If I was going to kill any of them, that's the one I would have killed. Her
Yeah,
family,
yeah.
her
You're
family
talking about Alex
her
Jones.
family
but-
disappeared Jimmy Hoffa and murdered one of the Kennedys.
Yeah.
I bought her dinner and said goodbye and gave her a house on a double lot in the richest city in Michigan for $1, and I walked away. Her family has murdered my next 4 wives. And I don't think it, I know it. They're bikers.
Right.
And the government hires them to murder my wives. They come in. Victoria was murdered by 9 people.
Yeah, and probably they almost certainly had to have been paid off by the government and possibly didn't even work there. I mean, and even the police
They're
ended up
hired
getting arrested
hitmen, Greg.
afterward.
They're hired hitmen.
Right.
Hired hitmen.
Extremely
They
well
think they're
paid.
teaching me a lesson.
Right.
They want me to kill them like they kill my wives. And I open murder cases. I live in a country where the law is what matters. I'm not going to walk into a hospital and just randomly shoot people. I'm not that stupid.
But then after you open a murder case, they arrest the entire police force.
Because they were selling the drugs I stopped.
Yeah, and pretend like the detective never existed when you call them back years later.
Yeah, my detective never existed.
Right.
That's correct.
That you talked to for a long period of time.
And then they show that same detective's family in all the news stories, but that detective and my conversation with that detective never happened. And then I have the, excuse me, I have the police records and the hospital records. And they use fake badge numbers and names on all my break-in reports. My home was broken into a dozen times by bikers who built a clubhouse down the street from the Manning Ranch after I moved in. And then as soon as my wives were murdered, they moved out. And the police in that town, they all went to jail for selling drugs. That's correct, Greg.
Right, right.
And
Well,
that
that's
was
how they
Terry,
keep.
that's where Terry and Victoria were murdered. And then
That's
when
how
I
they keep
lived,
the police force on a leash too. They can anytime they
I
want to
moved to
arrest them.
Tennessee to get away from the drug dealers in Michigan.
Yeah,
I bought a farm from Trump's tax attorney, Mazar. I'm on it one day and there's kids overdosed, little kids, 3 and 4 years old, Vernus kids, overdosed on cocaine and LSD from a Good Humor truck in my driveway. I turn around and there's a real pharmacist selling illegal drugs in my backyard.
Mhm.
I called the FBI. They put me in jail for a year.
so obviously you want to get away from that. So you move to Tennessee and they set you up. They follow you down there and they organize this whole thing, put you on a place where they're going to
And they murdered my
complete.
wives. And then
Yeah.
they murdered my wives to hide what they did to Jimmy Hoffa and the Kennedys and the Oakland County child kids and the drugs I stopped. Exactly
Yeah.
right, Greg.
Right. How many millions of dollars was put together to do all this, and
But
how well
you've
organized?
actually, Victoria had nothing wrong with her. She was sitting up waiting to come home. I had found her choked, gave her CPR, revived her. She was sitting up in the hospital talking to me, writing to me on a pad of paper. They released her, said she could come home in the morning. And then that night, 2 male nurses sodomized her right in her hospital room.
Yeah. Yeah, and called you on the phone when they did it, right?
Yeah, right on the Walter. Her advocate was Walters, and Barbara Walters and Walter Cronkite. They covered JFK's murder, didn't they, at CBS? And Garrett at CBS destroyed my income as my attorney was murdered that next morning. And then Bobby Walters and Walters State College there in Greenville and Mossheim, Tennessee, and Johnson City and the college, Walters State College, that family asked me to commit arson and burn their properties down so they could collect the fire insurance on their houses. And I had told them no, back when Terry was alive.
I have to
goes
think
all
that's
the way-
connected to all these
That
arson
goes all the
fires
way
that
back
were
to
your.
2000, the year 2000. He asked me to commit arson on all his properties, the Walters family.
Right.
My wife, Victoria, they murdered Terry, then they murdered Victoria and Walters. They called me right on Walter's phone as they cut Victoria's ears off. And then
Right.
12 doctors and 12 nurses, and this isn't underestimated, it was probably 16 nurses and 16 doctors. They all covered up my wife's missing ears with pillows. They put pillows all around her ears for 2 weeks and didn't tell me that somebody cut her ears off. And it wasn't an operation. They cut her ears off.
Right. Right.
With
And even though you managed to get the medical records, you're still not able to.
I have the medical records that say
Yeah.
she was
Right.
sodomized, that her vagina was swollen and bleeding.
Right.
And you've seen them, Greg. The
Right.
police have never read them. Why? I opened a murder case. I had to fight with police for 5 years to get a murder case open. I had to go down to the DA myself and complain to the DA about my wife's missing ears to get a murder case open because they murdered my attorney on his
And they
way
just
to the
put
DA.
it on a shelf and ignore it.
Yeah.
I mean, something with that much evidence is this obvious. They just ignore
And
it.
Thomas Garrett and Obama did that right from the White House.
Yeah, because they probably know that, if they do anything, the
then they gave
federal
you-
government will come after
Then they
them.
gave you Bradley Manning and Chelsea Manning, and Bradley Manning looks just like my brother Michael, who's dead now. And they cut
Right.
his ears off because he had cancer from Vietnam, his son.
Yeah, I put the pictures together. They do strongly resemble each other.
Yeah, he looks just like my brother Michael.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Garrett, right from the White House, he's the one that gave you that story on the AP at CBS, as Walter screamed over my advocate Walter's phone, Slater, and Slater is the judge that let Shovel out of jail, and Shovel's a whole nother story in the Renegades. He was put in jail supposedly for life, and he was let out of prison by Slater just to murder my wife.
Yeah.
In Oakland County. He came to that motor club that motorcycle club. And I don't think it, I know this is a truthful story because my still living second wife is the one that told me this story all the way back in 1960s. Only person on earth that knows him was my wife who's still alive. I divorced her. She didn't divorce me. I divorced her. She stalked me. And then her family and friends have murdered my wives 4 times for money,
Right.
for money. And to help the White
Money
House.
from the federal government, straight from the
Yeah,
White House.
right. L. Brooks Patterson, 20 million a year to solve murders he never solved.
Right.
And then
And why is it coming from the White House? Probably because of Kennedy, I imagine.
And then they
the
come
bottom
out
line.
and they kidnapped my daughter. I hired my daughter a psychiatrist. They murdered a psychiatrist and they murdered a county judge that gave me custody of my daughter. They murdered him and the doctor right at Selfridge Air National Guard.
Yeah.
Before they recalled the National Guard on 9/11.
Yeah, and so the people ask, well, why didn't you start a case? Well, you had a case against the Groves family, and they freaking
They
destroyed the
blew the
Pentagon.
case up. They blew up the Pentagon to hide
They
my
kill your
case.
lawyers.
They
kill
killed
your
two
lawyers.
judges. They've killed two judges.
Two
in my life.
judges.
2 judges in my life have been murdered. One was a Supreme Court justice, and that's no BS. My
Well, yeah,
wife,
and the Supreme Court.
my
right.
still loving wife has a Supreme Court justice in her family, Westhouse, and I'm the Fuller family. There's Supreme Court Justice Fuller. When I divorced her, they divided us up all the way through the military, and they murdered Judge Scalia.
Yeah.
Her astrological sign is the scales. And Scalia
Libra.
was murdered in Harris County, Houston. I'm Hugh, and I'm the Harris family. That was a murder of a Supreme Court justice when I divorced my wife. Then they murdered the judge that gave me custody of my kids at Selfridge Air National Guard prior to 9/11. The people who kidnapped me at 4 and murdered little kids run the sex crime division at the FBI. I mean, really think about the things I'm saying, and none of it's a lie.
I mean, all this stuff is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. Oh, that's the cover up in my life. It's because, and look who they're attacking on the money, and who the Russian guy in New York, de Blasio, he just removed my ancestor, Thomas Jefferson, who authored the Constitution, out of the New York buildings. So Thomas Jefferson no longer exists in New York history because of a Russian man who took my bass player's name, who was a decorated Vietnam Army veteran. On the day my bass player at Bottom Line, New York died, and he was born in Brooklyn, New York, a Russian man in Brooklyn, New York took his name and ran to be mayor of New York behind Giuliani. And they're passing down the mayor and the governor's positions, hiding my truth of Hoffa, the murders of Kennedy, the truth of 9/11, the truth of Oklahoma bombing. We didn't even mention Timothy McVeigh was my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Back when
And Nichols.
Nichols and Chapman. Chapman murdered John Lennon, and on and on and on. I'm a drummer. The Beatles. I'm also related to all the kings in Europe. There's no lie in any of this. My family's ancestors are related to all the kings in Europe. That means I am. I'm related to King James. He wrote your Bible, Greg.
Yeah, that's why your mom used to get invited by the Queen when she'd visit Canada to dinners.
She went to dinner with the Queen as I went to dinner with Margaret Thatcher, and they tried to get me to bring Bottom Line to London and Canada because they'd already stolen my trademark with DuPont and the WWF. DuPont's from France.
Yeah.
And they'd already stolen my name, Hugh Squire. They stole Bottom Line, my trademark. They stole my federal IRS licenses. The IRS itself stole my IRS licenses for Bottom Line. The workers at the IRS stole them.
Right.
And I still have my copies, Greg.
Yeah.
And
It's no wonder that
This is why my houses have been broken into dozens and dozens of times, because they're trying to steal all these documents and they can't.
Yeah, Osborne stole your Kennedy letters, your letters straight from Kennedy.
Right. They came from
They
Alaska.
came in and moved beside you. Yeah.
Yeah, they came from Alaska, broke into my home as I moved to Tennessee and stole my handwritten letters from John F. Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy. The police there told me, oh, well, they're just trying to find things to sell. And no, they're not. They're hiding my truth of the Oakland County child killings and the Kennedy murders. The very family that kidnapped me. Osborne kidnapped me. Osborne was governor of Michigan. Wallace kidnapped me. Wallace was a governor. Long kidnapped me. Long was a governor. You just had a murder in Alabama. Nance. Oh, that's my fourth murdered wife, Nancy. They cut her leg off and then they killed her on the day Trump let the Bundys out of jail. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's clear that we don't really have two parties, because the same con was handed just right down to Trump, and he just continued it. And he just handed it right off to Biden.
And I need to clarify Nance, the black woman Nance in Alabama. Nancy, before I married her, the renegades, 30 of them, 30 to 35 renegades, put her in a motel room, chained her to a bed, and raped her. They pulled a train on my wife before I married her. Her name was Nance. I always called her Nance. Her name was Nancy. Her father was mayor of East Detroit. She put some of them in jail, and that's why my second wife married me and hated her. I divorced Nancy when she neglected my kids. I got custody of my kids. My second wife hated her because she put her bikers friends in jail, the renegades. After they raped her, as I married her, they sang a song, Black Betty. And that was her mother's name, married to the mayor of East Detroit, Betty Suarez. Suarez was mayor of East Detroit back then, 1960s. Nancy was her stepdaughter. Then Joe Jacobs of IBM became her stepfather at our wedding. And Ram Jam, whoa, Black Betty, to get into Nancy's pants. They sang about raping her on the radio to me when I was 14 years old, Greg. I married her at 15. As I married her, I had to listen to the bikers rock and roll group sing to me about how they got into my wife's pants and pulled a train on her. Black Betty. All right? And there's no lie in this. I was a Detroit and Pontiac Musicians Union. All the music marked me. I had music all the way through school, through college. I married Nancy. They start singing to me how they got into her pants and pulled a train on her in a motel room in Mount Clemens. Black Betty. Betty was her mother. Oh, and they just murdered Nance in Alabama. Well, gee, my wife, Nancy, used to sleep with my best friend, a homicide detective in Warren, Michigan, Alan Akers. She had a kid with Alan Akers and gave that kid my name. I have a Hugh Squire III running around, who's Alan Akers, the homicide detective's kid. Whoa, Black Betty. So they killed Nance in Alabama, just like they killed the policeman in Indiana where Buttigieg is from, the gay governor with the twins. My twin was murdered, but now you have gay governors in Indiana and they have twins.
Yeah. You mean the mayor
after murdering my twin, chained to a toilet, sticking their penises in my orifices. All right. Yeah. There's no lie in this. This country has been taken over by gay people. And any straight person is well aware of this. And I tolerate gay people, but if they're gonna kidnap my kids and stick their penises in their asses, I'm not gonna tolerate them. I'm gonna fight back. If they're gonna pick up 4 of my wives and murder them, I'm gonna fight back. If they're gonna murder my Teamster boss, I'm going to fight back. If they're going to murder my president, I'm going to fight back. Your country's been taken over by gay political parties via DuPont in the WWF. And it goes all the way back to when I was a little kid at 16, 15, 14, all the way down to 12, playing drums in a strip club on 8 Mile in Detroit, where you get M&M from as I buy houses for Mary Miller and Mary Malloy, who worked for my businesses with Janet Barclay and Carpus at Jimmy Hoffa's Carousel. I rented a factory from the Carousel. That's Jack Ruby's trademark. I drove truck for Jimmy Hoffa. And these people have lied in movies, books, and all media, covered up all these murders in my life, and they think I'm going to sit here and remain silent? I'm not. I remained silent when I was 4 and I escaped you gay governors. I watched you kill kids all around me. I walked away, forgave you, and then you turned around and started murdering judges, kidnapping my kids, throwing dead kids on my properties. You murdered my wives, you murdered my attorneys, you've murdered 2 judges, and the police have helped you gay people do this. I'm not going to shut up anymore. You gay people need to get in your place. And I don't care if you go to church, and I don't care if the Pope and every preacher on earth tells me I have to forgive you. No, I don't. And I don't forgive any of you. And you see my hellfire? It's for you people who have murdered kids and my wives. And this hellfire is going to burn for eternity. And I'm going to keep throwing you into it with truth. If you people want to be gay and kill little kids, you got to fight with me.
And that's definitely the fight that is justly to be fought. That needs to be fought. Yeah.
No, I don't.
And nobody's fighting it because
I have nothing
they're not
against
true.
gay people, Greg. I walked away and forgave these 5 men and 2 women that raped me at 4 and murdered my twin. I forgave them because I really do believe in a God.
Mm-hmm.
When they started killing more little kids and my wives, I'm not forgiving anymore. Only a stupid person would forgive gay people who kill kids.
Of course.
If you want to have kids and raise them to be perverted like you are, do it on your own time. It ain't going to be on my time.
Yeah.
I have my hellfire for Halloween going here, and you people have burnt fires all around me, hiding my truth for 8 years now. You're going to run out of fire. I'm going to outlive your fires. And then what are you going to do next? You've murdered the people that framed Oswald. You've murdered them in the fires. Bledsoe, Smith, Lawson, these were my neighbors. You murdered them in the fires. They framed Oswald. They framed him. Everything they said in the Warren Report were lies. And I'm the kid.
Yeah, no different than the 9/11 Commission report.
It's all lies. It's all lies.
Yeah.
They say nothing about my $2 trillion stolen by DuPont and the WWF, do they?
Right.
I had 28,000 worldwide entertainment contracts with people like Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, Burt Reynolds, Kiss, Bob Seger, Ted Nugent, anybody you can think of, even the people that sang Black Betty and told me how they got into my wife's pants and pulled a train on her while she was chained in a hotel room in Mount Clemens. Even Copperhead Road, Steve Earle, all of you people, I was your publisher. I was your publisher at ASCAP, BMI, Astra, Stationers Hall in London. I was your publisher. And all of you pretend like I don't exist. There's your hellfire. And I'm never going to stop saying truth. And I got documents to prove all of this. You've destroyed the country my family created. And that Russian in New York burning Jefferson's statue in New York, there's no words for a man like you. You're the scum of the earth, de Blasio.
Oh, you can tell, just take one look at his daughter and you see exactly what kind of person he is.
Biden has Garrett with Obama murder my wife and my attorney right out of the White House. And then they want to put a black woman named Tubman. Well, I had a girlfriend, her name was Denzel Washington's sister, Anthianetta Washington. Her brothers were linebackers on the Chicago Bears. And then they were on the Lions. I used to date Anthianetta Washington. Every time I come over to pick her up, she was in a tub, taking a bath. And you want to replace my great-grandfather, Jackson on the 20, with Tubman. After murdering my wives, Obama, after murdering my wives, Biden, just your name tells me your family is a long line of gay people. And you don't even stand up for your own race. There's something wrong with a man who doesn't stand up for his own race. You're white, Biden. You're not black. You're not Chinese. So why are you getting payola from Chinese and protecting black men who murder white women? Something very mentally wrong with you, Mr. Biden.
Sure is. Yeah.
It's my happy Halloween. There's my murdered Terry, my fiance, on July 4th. She went out to walk her dog and they hung her in her dog's leash. They didn't kill the dog. And I saved her life. I brought her back from the dead after they hung her.
She and Victoria both, yeah.
Yeah, I brought Victoria back to life. Then they murdered them both 30 days later. And there's my hellfire here out in California. And my biography is going to be out for all of you people, and I'm naming names. I'm naming DuPont, Ventura, Julian Assange, Alex Jones. I'm naming names. And I've been doing this right along. Come on, sue me. Let's see how far you get, you bastards, you pricks. Hiding the truth of murdered kids so you can become millionaires. You're beyond belief. And you've destroyed this country with your lies. I'm going to set the record straight with my bibliography, and then I'm going to make a movie and put it all over the world. And I'm going to put all you people in a hellfire you deserve. You're starting those fires. This is being done on purpose to hide my truth. What do you got to add, Greg Bowe? You have the floor for 15 minutes. All yours.
15 minutes. Oh my. Well, Victoria, her dad was kind of a big name. You mentioned that he ran Macy's parade in New York.
Hudson's, yeah. He was a cook in the Navy, like my dad was a cook in the Navy. They were both machinist mates. They were on destroyers, landing craft, and submarines.
Yeah, special forces.
They would be what Jesse Ventura would call special forces. Now, special forces the Navy funds the CIA, and special forces runs the CIA. They murdered my wives, and their fathers served with Kennedy in the Navy.
Yeah, so he was a pretty big deal. So here's a question I've been trying to understand. When you met Victoria, he was still alive, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, I and Victoria stayed with Bill for 5 years. He was a really nice
man.
Man.
You stayed with him. Okay.
Yeah, I rented a house from him.
Okay. That's what I was trying to figure out, because she seemed really, she had to crawl into the Kmart to go to work and everything, because she couldn't walk. And I was thinking, well, where's her dad? Why wasn't he helping her?
Her dad was working at Hudson's and
there?
running the Macy's parade. Her dad was the head cook at Hudson's, Greg.
Or why didn't he bring her to him, or send her money or something. See, it seems like he should have had more assets to be able to help. Having that,
His
he's
wife
having
died.
that much
His
money.
wife, Helen, died
Okay.
when Victoria was 16. He raised
Uh-huh.
2 boys and a girl on his own. He did all he could.
Okay.
He had to work and raise his children too.
hmm
Try doing
Okay,
that.
that was one
And
question I
all
was
of
trying
his
to figure
children,
out.
all of his children had muscular dystrophy. He was a Navy man under World War II. He was like my dad. I was working at 4 on a Twin Pines milk truck, buying food for my family. My wife, even though her and her brothers had muscular dystrophy, her brothers were in the Marines in Vietnam. Her brother was in the Marines in Vietnam with muscular dystrophy. He taught his kids to be self-sufficient, even if they had to crawl.
Well, that she definitely got the message. I mean, Victoria's a really impressive woman.
She was a nice
Really amazing.
person. She was the nicest wife I ever had. She's the only wife I had that worked other than Terry. Terry worked, but Terry was my fiance, not my wife.
Right.
Victoria, my first 2 wives never worked. They just mooched off of me.
Right. Right.
And they would sleep with other men and women.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I'm the one that worked. I built a house. I gave it to my second wife for $1. A 5-bedroom home for $1. I gave it to her on a double lot in Troy, Michigan. Richest city in Michigan. I gave her a house for $1 so her kids had a place to grow up after I divorced her. I'm a bad guy.
Right.
Her family
But
disappeared Jimmy Hoffa.
yeah. So your brother was murdered. Now I'm changing subjects now. So your brother was murdered. You believe he was your twin brother, dumped in a field in Pennsylvania, just like an airplane went down in a field in Pennsylvania, which is certainly not coincidence.
That's where Vicky was
They
born.
write a book called The Boy in the Box, addressed to Mr. H. Then you have in the WWE or F at the time.
There's more
Hulk
to the
Hogan.
story you're talking about. One of my rapists was Daryl Hall. I grew up with Daryl Hall's TV in Pennsylvania, where they murdered my twin. They murdered my twin in Michigan and carried him across 3 state lines into Pennsylvania and dumped his body in the field where the 9/11 plane crashed. If not that field, relatively close. It was done making fun of me as the world got people like Joe Walsh of the Eagles on Daryl's TV in Pennsylvania. Daryl Hall masturbated in my face as the Osborne family raped me chained to a toilet. There's no lie in this. Daryl Hall was 12 to 15 years old when he would self-suck and masturbate in my face while the Osborne family raped me. No lie in this.
You'd mentioned Triple H, a WWE character, and Hulk Hogan, which is Double H, basically. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the WWE was started by DuPont.
None of this.
And they knew
Hulk Hogan and his brother Michael. I had a teacher named Hogan in Warren, Michigan, and Hazel Park, where the Oakland County Child. Mrs. Hogan, one of my teachers. Well, Mike Hogan was a bouncer of mine with Bear and Hulk Hogan before anybody knew him on the WWF. He went back to Florida and wrote a book and said I was lying because they were stealing my trademark. And they did that at a restaurant lounge called Cobby's in Utica, Michigan, where my father-in-law Bill Milan lived.
all of this explains how Hulk Hogan knew that the Twin Towers were going to crumbling down 12 years
because all of this was planned.
Right.
My baby pictures. And it was all planned around my trademark Bottom Line. That's why Hugh Squire, the owner of Bottom Line New York, I don't exist.
And that's
You
why
have
they
a
killed
Bottom
Terry
Line
at
club
9/11.
in New York where all the people like Bruce Springsteen and all the rockers come out of, my stolen trademark. You have a Bottom Line bar at Albert Hall in London on Huey Squire Avenue. I don't exist, Greg. They stole $2 trillion from me. I own the contracts to all the entertainers, all of them. 28,000 worldwide multi-million dollar entertainment contracts. I inherited them at ASCAP and BMI in New York on the day that Frank Sinatra and Morton Gould made me a publisher in fully federal court.
Yeah.
I was with Elvis Presley's publisher and the Mills Brothers, the Pointer Sisters, Tina Turner's husband, Ike Turner. Tina Turner was singing about "I'm simply the best." And none of this is coincidence, Greg. None of it.
See, a few people have pointed out that it is obvious that that Hulk Hogan was talking about 9/11, 12 years earlier. But your story explains why and how he knew, and nobody else seems to ever even bother to try to understand or
Oh,
even
they
ask
don't
the question.
care.
Well,
They
how
think-
did he know?
They all think I'm crazy and lying, and I'm not.
But why isn't anybody even asking the question? How did he know?
Because they've all become millionaires hiding my truth.
Yeah.
Look, Greg, the Fuller family owned the buses. We own the milk trucks. We own the Fuller transmissions. We own the Massey Ferguson and Harris steam thrashers. We own the Fuller transmission and all semis. We own the Chevy van, the Ford van. What's the name of the Ford van? There's a Country Squire car made in the 50s named after my family. My family ran Henry Ford's Dearborn Mansion.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the name of their van, Greg? Do you even know?
The van.
I'll
Yeah,
just tell
somewhere
you,
in my head I know.
it's Econ O-Line.
Right.
I'm the line. I'm the line. And my family owned the patents on every van in the country and the buses. And this is the money stolen from me by my own family and my neighbors, as my neighbors killed little kids, killed the Kennedys, killed Hoffa, and then they framed me for all of these things. And I played music for 50 years.
For bottom line.
As bottom line. It was my trademark.
Right. Yeah, that's a better way to say it.
Weiner and Associates were supposed to protect my trademark. They didn't. And gee, what does Mr. Weiner do online? He exposes his penis to little girls, doesn't he?
Right.
Now, well, I'm never going to shut up, Greg.
Yeah. All these people are connected pedophiles.
The people who don't listen to my truth, you're all headed for that hellfire behind me. You're allowing your country, which is the greatest, biggest country on earth, to go down the tubes with a bunch of gay people who have taken over your money, your White House, your Senate, your media, and none of you do anything to fight back.
I'm amazed that a lot of the people that say they're against the pedophiles and the gay movement and everything,
I'm not against. I'm not against the pedophiles.
No, I'm not saying you are, Hugh. Hugh, what I'm saying is the people that say this all the time.
I'm against people. I'm against men and women who kill little kids after raping them. I'm against that.
Right. Yeah, but you hear all day long, you hear people that say they're truth seekers, they're against these things, and yet they're led around by the lies that those people produce, like Graham and Graham Media and all the cover-ups of 9/11.
Barr and Kathy O'Brien were my neighbors.
Yeah.
They weren't used by Hollywood. I was. They run Hollywood.
Right.
This is the con. This is how they got federal taxpayer money into Graham's pocket, Billy Graham and Senator Graham and Peter Graham. They got it into their own pockets. Your money, you pay in taxes. That's how they did it, saying they're going to solve child killings they never solved. As they hid
all the truth seekers.
They hid me, the guy with
around by these
Greg. They hid me, the guy with the real truth. My own neighbors, as they stole trillions of dollars from me. And now they want to replace the founding fathers of this country with black people who my family didn't even want them here. That's the kings. That's the Dutch king, the English king, the Spanish king. They brought the slaves here. My family didn't bring them here.
Right.
And they're blaming my family for that? It's not my family's fault. My family didn't want them here. That's why we rebelled. But they don't teach you that, because the people who brought them here, like Kamala's family, they don't tell you the truth. Her name, she's not my family. I'm the Harris family. Kamala Harris is not my family. Kamala Harris, her family are the slave traders that brought the slaves here for the kings and queens of Europe.
Whereas the Harris family you're related to is actually with Lincoln and the abolitionists.
Right.
Right.
My
At
family,
Ford's Theater.
my family is the family that fought against Kamala, her family. And her name is Kamala M. Hoffa, according to the law, but she chooses to use Harris. And the Harris family in America fought against slaves. They fought against the kings and the slave traders. So she's pretending to be my family, and she's the very family my family fought against, as they destroy my family's statues all over the country via the gay movement and Black Lives Matter. Well, if Black Lives Matter, my wife Terry was married to a black man. You allowed a black man's wife to be murdered on my birthday, not once, twice.
Yeah, and so for the people that think they're truth seekers out there,
Kiki Nelson, her and I, we would sit with Sylvester Stallone's wife on Belle Isle. She was a black woman. I would party with Eddie Murphy, Sylvester Stallone's wife, Gilbert Hill. These are all black people. I lived with a black family, Michael Jackson's family, the Jackson family on 5 Mile in Detroit. I grew up with a black family. If Black Lives Matter, why don't my white wives who are married to black men, why don't they matter?
Yeah, right. At least get an obituary, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, they should have at least got an obituary, and they were dismembered. They should have got murder cases, but I had to fight for 5 years to open one murder case. And then they don't even look
Which is completely ignored, right?
Well, in my book, Greg, we're putting the medical records right from the hospital in the book. Correct?
Yeah.
We're putting photographs of them dismembering and sodomizing my wife in the hospital and then slitting her throat Halloween Day. It's in her hospital records, but the police, they haven't read them yet.
Right.
And this is 10 years later. And only Black Lives Matter. BLM, that's my stolen trademark. The Bundys, BLM, that's my stolen trademark. Bottom Line Music, New York. You get all the BLMs that stole my money, but you never meet me, the guy that created the word. I'll go on, Greg.
Well, I think those people out there that call themselves truthers, that think they're truthers, and maybe they even defend some little aspect or some important aspect of the Constitution or something like that, but they're enamored by the WWE that knew that 9/11 was coming, and you never even stop and ask, well, why? How did Hulk Hogan know this? How did he know the Twin Towers were going to come crumbling down with Randy Savage? You never even bother to put
Not
together.
Hoffa, Hogan.
Did I say that?
Yeah, Hogan.
I said Hulk Hoffa. Hulk Hogan. I didn't hear myself say
I
it.
might have heard you wrong, but it was Hogan who said that.
Yeah.
Hogan also lied and wrote a book. He went back to Florida, started sleeping with his neighbor's wife, and said that he was never my bouncer. Yes, he was. So was his brother, Michael.
Right. So these people that think they're truthers, but they're enamored by the WWE, and they buy stories like the MK Ultra stories and the people put out that are straight from Graham Media. Not that none of the pieces of the information are maybe partially correct, but it's clearly set up to hide the reality of your story. They go to aliens, they go to Bigfoot and S4 and every kind of bullcrap story that's possible out there. Everything except the truth. Well, they're not really helping America. They're not really helping the truth. They're never going to get to.
They have destroyed all the values in America and handed it over to the gay people who killed little kids in Oakland County.
And all those stories that they're pumping out day after day on all their live streams and all their videos and all their YouTube videos that they're putting out there are literally the lies and the deception and the con put forth by the people that they say they don't like. And that is mind-boggling. And for real people that really care, need to wake up to that, understand that they're part of the con, and start really taking your stories seriously here, so that they can put together the real facts and understand how to really help America, and bring it back to civility, and bring the people that did the wrong,
I have faith,
bring
Greg, that the
justice
people,
for those
I
that were
have faith that the people who really
wrong.
matter on this earth, the people who really matter, they know I'm saying truth.
Yeah.
And the rest of these people who ignore me and laugh at me and call me crazy and ignore the truth of what's going on in this country, they're going to fall by the wayside big time.
Yeah.
I have faith that the people on earth who know truth, they're all going to stand up one day. And there's no doubt, Greg, everything.
And the people that aren't pushing the con with Alex Jones, and the people that aren't pushing the lies with Graham, and and the religious cons with Graham and Hiles and Hovind and all these others, Baker, and all everybody that's not pushing that con, they're going to stand up against the people that are.
Yeah, history is going to 100 years from now. History is going to show I was telling the truth.
Yeah.
I'm the Baker family. I'm the Gardner family. I'm the Fuller family. I'm the Harris family. Why are all these families being murdered in my backyard by the White House? I'm the real history of this country. And in the long term, the truth is gonna prevail. And all the people ignoring my truth now, they're just gonna fall. I've had 4 wives murdered. Who in this country has had 4 wives murdered by the White House?
Right.
Just that should tell any person who's denying my truth, there's something really wrong here.
And by both parties. So whichever party you like or don't like
Not
out
both.
there.
No, Greg, not both.
Well,
all 3.
Yeah, and the independents. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Paul was
and
my
all that.
business manager, and he sold me out to the Russian mafia called de Blasio in New York, who is throwing Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Constitution, out of the public buildings. He's throwing
ignoring
away
real truth and just pushing the other
a
parties.
Russian man in New York is throwing away the man who wrote your Constitution, and nobody said a word, Greg.
Yeah, and that's the independent party. Yeah, that's their fault. Right, I get you. And Rand Paul. Makes perfect sense. The coordination between some of these things, some of the things I was going to say at the very beginning, it's pretty amazing. Terry was first hung on your birthday at 9:11 p.m. The numbers on your baby pictures were 2 and 4 that they wrote on there. And it said George Towers took the baby pictures, and it was stamped right there on there. George, like George Bush knocked down the Twin Towers.
All media is run by the people who kidnapped me at 4, Greg. Right. This.
And then those numbers 2 and 4, 4 and 2, 42
Anderson,
days later.
Andrews, Graham, these people kidnapped me at 4 and killed little kids. They run the media.
Yeah, well, look at the military. Look at the military coordination, how they did this, because this is kind of fascinating. This is 42 days later, just like the 4 and 2 on your baby pictures. Okay, then she was murdered again in the hospital. That was the day of her second death. Okay, and then the full moon that month was at 2/27, and then that sinkhole opened up on 7/22. And those numbers, like we said earlier, are Reagan's was shot at 2/27, and Lincoln died at 7/22. And then, 8/14, is the 226th day of the year. So the death would have been announced on the 227th day, the very next day. So there it is again. Then you had the Great North American Blackout 42 years after the first one that happened that year, and it knocked out power to 42,000 people. They've coordinated this, and I know a lot of it was in New York Street and knocked out power at 42nd Street.
It was right where they stole my publishing company, bottom line.
And that's the 4-2 right there on your baby
I've
pictures.
been fighting these people all along since I was born, Greg.
This is clearly the military. Only the military can coordinate.
I'm well aware of that. It had to be military that murdered Admiral Byrd. I'm well aware of this, Greg.
Right.
And what military was it? Oh, it was the gay political party and the people in the gay political party and military.
Right.
murdered straight people, murdered my straight wives. And they're still hiding my murdered wives. Why is there no mention of 4 murdered, dismembered, and murdered wives? And they were all murdered on holidays. Why does nobody interview me, Greg? I've had a wife murdered every 7 years for 38 years. I mean, really think about that. They were murdered by the White House. Why?
Right.
I'm not a criminal. I own Smoky Mountain Ministries. I was raised to be a priest. I'm not a criminal. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. My wives didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't do drugs. They all had college degrees, except for Nancy, my first wife. My first wife, Nancy, her father was mayor of East Detroit.
Right.
The renegades pulled a train at her in a Mount Clemens motel room. She put some of them in jail. And then the renegades had one of their presidents was my next wife, and she hated my wife. And she's still alive. My second wife, who hated my wife, is still alive after murdering my next 4. And my wife didn't murder him. Her family and friends did.
Right. This is why the biker gangs love Trump.
My second wife was a nice wife. I divorced her because I got tired of her family using me to sell drugs.
Right.
Her family helped disappear Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah.
Her family wouldn't stop selling drugs. I would pick my car up after leaving one job, go to another job, and her brother and my wife had filled my trunk with drugs they were selling for the renegades. I told her if she did it again, I was going to divorce her. She did it again, I divorced her. It's real simple.
And all those guys loved Trump, and Trump's tax lawyers were selling drugs on the property that they rented to you.
They all were. Everybody in my life loves drugs.
Yeah.
I'm for real, Greg. I'm the only guy I know. I haven't drank my entire adult life. I don't do drugs. I quit smoking years ago. And
maybe that's why I don't
know anybody like me. My wife was murdered on Halloween Day. They dismembered her, cut her ears off, slit her throat Halloween Eve. And they gave me a doctor here where I live now, right from the government. They gave me Dr. Hollows, All Hallows Eve. I just jumped Dr. Hollows because he was treating me like I'm some kind of a criminal instead of helping me get better.
Yeah.
And you know this yourself, Greg. And I'm on 0 pills until I met Dr. Hollows. Now I'm on 2 pills for no reason at all.
Right, right.
And I have to wait 4 months to see a new doctor. And my new doctor will be Mr. Towers. And these are government doctors appointed to me. They're harassing me after murdering my wives, blowing up the Twin Towers, and killing the presidents. And I hear Dr. Towers is a real nice doctor. He's treated many of my neighbors very well. We'll see how he treats me.
Right. George Towers right there on your baby.
You already know that where I was born, the Towers family murdered Judge Hunter Stair with Sheriff Hackle. The Towers family was my chorus teacher at Warren High, who covered up my truth, the Oakland County child killers. And they were policemen in Oakland and Macomb County. You know, I'm on the other side of the country with the Towers family. I don't know if they're related or not, but gee, can I get a doctor that's not related to all these murders? I mean, I'm a guy that doesn't drink. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I'm pretty healthy. I mean, you can tell looking at me, I'm pretty healthy. I'm an old man. I'm 70, but I'm on 0 pills. Everybody else my age, I look around, they're on a dozen pills. You know, and then they give me doctors like Dr. Hollows from London. Well, the London Queen, she sent me her nights and they killed the Kennedys. And I don't think it, I know it. So why would my American government set me up with a doctor from London? I'm tired of the way I'm treated in this country. And the founders of this country are my relatives. They're my relatives. Back to you, Greg.
Well, that's probably why I understand you, because I never drank or smoked or done any sort of drugs or anything like that, and maybe that's partially why so many people in this country can't understand. That's one thing about Muslims, is they're not allowed to smoke or drink or do drugs. Well, I don't know about smoke, but they're not allowed to do drugs, and drink, and all that stuff. And maybe their minds are a little bit clearer,
Greg,
and that's why they can
Greg,
understand you.
Muslims have never hurt me or hurt my wives. And I was
Right.
surrounded by Muslims in Detroit and Chicago, surrounded by them. Never done anything to hurt me. The
And
Christians,
maybe that's why they can understand.
the Christians in my life have murdered my wives.
Right.
They've
Yeah.
murdered kids, and they hide behind Jesus as they murder people.
All the time. All the
And
time.
I won't step foot in a church, and I was raised to be a priest. I owned a ministry. I will not go to your Christian churches anymore.
Right.
I know who you are.
And I see the people from Baker College and how
And
that
then who's
con is on
attacking
even.
me? I'm Jackson on the 20. You got Jesse Jackson. I'm the King in the Martin family. You got Martin Luther King attacking me. L.
Right.
Akers, L. Sharpton.
And don't forget
Another
Baker
black
and
man.
Baker College.
I lived with the Jackson family. Black Baptist pastors are attacking me, and they do nothing as my wives are dismembered and murdered. Now we're going to have Denzel Washington's family, Tubman, on the 20, replacing my family. A Russian man took Thomas Jefferson out of New York, the author of the Constitution, and nobody even complains.
Right.
I'm being attacked by BLM, Black Lives Matter. It's my own stolen trademark, Greg.
Yeah. Bottom line. Yeah.
And I'm not racist. I grew up with a black family, and I grew up on an Indian reservation. I live with Indians right now. I'm not racist. I like Mother Earth religion. I like Indian people. I like black people. I don't have anything against gays. I have a lot against gays who murder kids.
Right.
And they can't tell me they don't. I watched them murder kids in my neighborhood for 20 years.
Yeah.
So they could make $20 million a year with L. Brooks Patterson. I know who they are. And now they run the government. I know who you are. Buttigieg with your twin and your new husband. You people are evil. You murder my twin, and then you put twins in front of me and brag about it. You're evil.
Right.
And you murdered Lieutenant Aaron Allen. Alan Akers. Aaron took my place when Bottom Line was stolen from me by my little brother and friends in the WWF. Aaron Allen, you murdered Lieutenant Aaron Allen, Buttigieg. As you took your new husband and all those people, and gee, who was born in that state, Greg? Wasn't it Judith Laurie Baker was born there?
Well, she wasn't born there, but she grew up there for a while.
She grew up there, and her father worked at Chrysler with my family. And Lee Iacocca lived next door to me, and I built the assembly line at Chrysler. I built the assembly lines for Chrysler. I designed them.
Right. Isn't that interesting? The Baker name.
And I'm the Baker family she was cheating on.
Yeah.
With Oswald.
Jimmy Baker and
as
Baker
I was kidnapped by Osborne.
Yeah.
You got this picture? But I don't exist, and I'm a liar.
Right.
The guy they stole,
Baker married Graham, and there you got Graham.
The guy they stole millions of dollars from, trillions of dollars from my publishing company. I'm a liar.
Right.
All of you should be ashamed of yourselves, what you've done to this country. This was the greatest nation on earth. You've destroyed it.
Yeah. We invite anybody that really wants to actually know the truth in history. Come in and ask questions and learn, because you've never heard the truth before. Everything you've heard from
nobody
everybody
has
else.
any truth anywhere. All of the major newscasts. Andrews is on Fox. Andrews raped me. Anderson is
Right.
CNN. Anderson raped me. Cooper raped my daughter. Nancy in Alabama is CNN. They doubled my wife, Nance.
Nancy Grace.
CNN, Anderson, Cooper, the people that raped me, and then they raped my daughters.
Right, right. Or then they'll listen to
It doesn't
Alex
matter.
Jones.
It doesn't matter which news station you go to. Detroit TV is run by Graham. They raped me.
Right. And they created this Alex Jones character because the guy that was your neighbor there in Greenville wouldn't run any stories about your murdered wives, and he lived right there and ran the newspaper.
Yeah,
And so
no
they
obituaries.
created the Alex Jones everybody knows.
Yeah,
Because
Alex Jones,
to
no
another Alex
obituaries for Hugh's wife, but he used my chalk drawing to
Right.
tell you 9/11 was an inside job. Well, I'm the gardener in the Cook family.
Yeah, that
My
he got
second
hooked up,
wife
yeah.
is the Cook family that stole the chalk drawing from Gardner.
Yeah,
Interesting, isn't it?
unreal. Well, it's been a pretty long time. What do you say we stop it there? What do you think?
Yeah, we did over an hour. There's hellfire for everybody. You have me in this fire. I live here in these fires for 8, 9 years now. And my wife was murdered on Halloween Day, and you gave me Dr. Hollows, Biden. Thank you, Mr. Biden. Right out of London, where that gay Rolling Stone Mick Jagger's from London. He's probably related to Biden. And I know that Kamala's family was running slaves for them back in the 1600s. And
Yep,
now she's
from
pretending
Jamaica.
to be my family with Gonzalez, who's my family. Gonzalez, head of ICE, is my family too. Jesus Gonzalez is my uncle. He created the Texas Rangers back before I was born. He's buried in my family cemetery, not too far from where they buried Jimmy Hoffa. But they want you to think that I carried Jimmy Hoffa in a semi in barrels and buried him in New Jersey, where my cousin Agatha Christie's family lived. These are the people that stole my life and murdered my wives and then lied about everything in all media. And I'm the truth of all of this. And I have a dog there, a girl that was protecting little kids for Ronald Reagan her entire life, was walking and 2 policemen hung her in the leash. They were stalking her on my farm. And it was just happened to be owned by Manning. And it was a Civil War ranch in the Battle of Blue Springs. That's where the North finally repelled the South and started winning the Civil War. My farm, where they murdered 2 of my wives. Gay people did that. Bye, Greg. Bye.
All right, I'll see you later.